I sat in the marble conference room of Morrison and Associates watching our new vice president Bradley Kingston humiliate me in front of tech billionaire Robert Sterling. When Sterling asked about my innovative data analytics strategy, Kingston waved dismissively and declared, "She's just support staff, ignore her." The words hit like a physical blow. I had spent 4 months architecting this $3 billion digital transformation proposal, working 18-hour days, sacrificing weekends, and now this arrogant man was erasing my existence with one cruel sentence. Sterling's steel gray eyes hardened as he studied Kingston, then shifted to me with unmistakable recognition. 6 months earlier, everything in my professional world had felt bright and promising. After 7 years climbing the ranks at Morrison and Associates, I had finally earned my promotion to senior strategy analyst. The achievement came after I developed revolutionary predictive algorithms that helped three Fortune 500 companies avoid bankruptcy, saving them a combined $400 million in potential losses. My innovation used machine learning to analyze supply chain vulnerabilities and market fluctuations with unprecedented accuracy. Managing partner Catherine Brooks summoned me to her corner office on a crisp October morning, the Manhattan skyline glittering beyond her floor-to-ceiling windows. She poured 2 cups of Ethiopian coffee from her personal espresso machine and settled into the leather chair across from me. "Angie Sterling Industries wants to completely reinvent their business model," she said, sliding a thick folder across her mahogany desk. "Robert Sterling built a technology empire, but he recognizes that his company needs fundamental transformation to stay competitive. This contract could be worth $3 billion over 5 years." My pulse quickened as I flipped through the preliminary documents. Sterling Industries operated in 17 countries with over 50,000 employees, but their infrastructure relied on systems from the 1990s. The modernization challenge was staggering and fascinating. "I want you to lead this project personally," Brooks continued. "Sterling specifically requested our most innovative analyst after hearing about your work with Paramount Manufacturing and Coastal Logistics." For the next 4 months, I became completely absorbed in understanding Sterling Industries from every angle. I traveled to 12 different facilities across 7 states, conducting interviews with department heads, floor managers, warehouse supervisors, and frontline employees. In Milwaukee, I spent 3 days shadowing production teams to understand their workflow bottlenecks. In Phoenix, I analyzed their distribution networks and identified inefficiencies costing millions annually. My apartment became a war room covered with whiteboards, flowcharts, and statistical models. I tracked shipping patterns, studied competitor strategies, and built comprehensive databases tracking every metric imaginable. Sleep became optional as I refined algorithms that could predict market shifts with 94% accuracy. The breakthrough came during a particularly intense weekend in January. While analyzing supplier relationships, I discovered that Sterling Industries could reduce costs by 38%, while improving delivery times by restructuring their vendor networks using artificial intelligence optimization. The insight required connecting dozens of seemingly unrelated data points, but the pattern was beautiful once I saw it. My presentation materials grew into a masterpiece of strategic planning spanning 200 pages of analysis, projections, and implementation roadmaps. I created visual models showing exactly how each department would transition, timeline charts for technology upgrades, and financial forecasts, proving the investment would generate returns within 18 months. 2 weeks ago, everything changed when Bradley Kingston arrived as our new Vice President of Client Relations. Brooks announced his hiring during a staff meeting, emphasizing his Harvard Business School credentials and his previous role at Goldman Sachs. Kingston was tall, sharp-featured with perfectly styled brown hair and an expensive suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. During his first week, Kingston scheduled individual meetings with senior staff members. When my turn came, he leaned back in his chair and studied my resume with theatrical attention. Impressive technical background, he said, his tone suggesting the opposite. But client relationships require a different skill set. These Fortune 500 executives expect to work with leadership, not analysts. I've been the primary contact for Sterling Industries since October, I replied carefully. Robert Sterling and I have developed a strong working relationship. Kingston's smile felt predatory. That's going to change. I need to add strategic oversight to your technical analysis. These clients need to see that Morrison and Associates provides executive-level service. Over the following days, Kingston systematically inserted himself into every aspect of my Sterling Industries project. He demanded copies of all my research, attended my planning sessions, and began referring to our strategy in conversations with Brooks. During team meetings, he would interrupt my explanations to add his own commentary, usually restating what I had just said using business school jargon. Yesterday morning, Kingston cornered me in the break room while I was refilling my coffee mug. The early sunlight streamed through the windows and the office buzzed with pre-meeting energy. Tomorrow's presentation is crucial for both of our careers, he said, stirring sugar into his espresso. I'll handle all client communication while you provide technical support if needed. Sterling needs to see that Morrison and Associates offers senior-level strategic thinking. My stomach nodded. Bradley, I created this entire proposal. Robert Sterling expects to discuss implementation details that only I fully understand. That's exactly the problem, Kingston replied, his voice hardening. You think like an analyst instead of a strategist. Leave the relationship management to someone with the right experience. The climactic twist that should have warned me came during this morning's final briefing. As our team gathered in the small conference room adjacent to where we would meet, Sterling Kingston addressed the group with casual authority. Remember, I'll be leading today's discussion, he announced, straightening his burgundy tie. Angie will be present for technical questions, but all strategic communication should flow through me. We need to present a unified leadership message. I felt my throat tighten, but nodded silently. After 4 months of preparation, I was being relegated to a supporting role in my own project. The injustice burned, but I convinced myself that the work itself mattered more than getting credit. The Sterling Industries meeting began at precisely 10 o'clock in Morrison and Associates' most prestigious conference room. The space was designed to intimidate and impress, with its gleaming marble table, original oil paintings, and panoramic views of Central Park. Robert Sterling entered exactly on time, accompanied by his assistant Diana Walsh, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, wearing a charcoal gray business suit and carrying a leather portfolio. Sterling commanded attention without trying. Despite being in his mid-50s, he moved with the energy of someone half his age. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his navy blue suit was clearly custom-tailored, and his presence filled the room with quiet confidence. I had spent months studying his biography and business philosophy, but seeing him in person was different. This was a man who had built a technology empire from nothing and revolutionized 3 different industries. Kingston immediately stepped forward with an aggressive handshake and broad smile. Robert, welcome to Morrison and Associates. I'm Bradley Kingston, Vice President of Client Relations. I'll be personally overseeing your account moving forward. Sterling accepted the handshake politely, but his eyes quickly scanned the room and settled on me with a brief nod of recognition. Ms. Walsh, I believe we've spoken several times about this project. Actually, I'm Diana Walsh, Mr. Sterling's assistant, Diana corrected with professional courtesy. You've been working primarily with Angie Rodriguez. She gestured toward me. An uncomfortable pause followed before Kingston recovered with practiced smoothness. Of course, yes. Angie has been handling the technical analysis under my strategic direction. As we settled around the conference table, Kingston launched into what should have been my presentation. The irony was overwhelming as I watched him display my charts, reference my research, and present my innovations as his own vision. He spoke with confident authority about concepts he barely understood, using phrases like synergistic optimization and paradigmatic transformation that meant nothing but sounded impressive. Our comprehensive analysis reveals unprecedented opportunities for operational efficiency, Kingston declared, advancing to a slide showing my supply chain optimization model. Through strategic restructuring of vendor relationships, Sterling Industries can achieve significant cost reductions while maintaining quality standards. Sterling listened intently, occasionally taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Diana Walsh transcribed everything with methodical precision, her fountain pen moving steadily across expensive stationery. As Kingston continued butchering my carefully crafted presentation, I noticed Sterling's expression growing increasingly puzzled. What specific cost reductions are we projecting? Sterling asked, his tone neutral but expectant. Kingston hesitated for just a moment before answering with vague confidence. Substantial savings across multiple operational categories. Our models indicate significant improvements in efficiency metrics. Could you quantify that? Sterling pressed. What percentage reduction in operational costs? Well, the exact figures depend on various implementation factors, Kingston replied, gesturing broadly toward the charts without referencing specific numbers. The important thing is the strategic vision for transformation. I watched in growing horror as Kingston fumbled questions that required detailed knowledge of my analysis. When Sterling asked about machine learning algorithms, Kingston described them as advanced computer programs for processing business data. When Sterling inquired about implementation timelines, Kingston suggested unrealistic deadlines that would require technologies that didn't exist yet. The artificial intelligence components will optimize supply chain relationships. Kingston continued mispronouncing several technical terms I had spent weeks explaining to him. Our predictive models utilize sophisticated algorithms to enhance operational performance. Sterling's frustration was becoming visible. He kept glancing at me as if expecting clarification or correction, but Kingston had made it clear that I should remain silent unless directly addressed. Diana Walsh continued taking detailed notes, but I caught her exchanging meaningful looks with Sterling during Kingston's more egregious mistakes. The situation deteriorated further when Sterling asked about budget projections for technology infrastructure upgrades. Kingston confidently quoted numbers that were off by tens of millions of dollars and suggested deployment schedules that violated basic project management principles. He proposed installing enterprise software systems in 6 weeks when the process typically required 6 months of careful planning and testing. These cost projections seem unusually optimistic, Sterling observed, his tone becoming cooler. How did you arrive at these figures? Kingston's confidence wavered slightly. Our technical team performed comprehensive analysis of all relevant factors. The numbers reflect our strategic assessment of operational requirements. Which technical team? Sterling asked pointedly. I'd like to understand the methodology behind these calculations. That's just technical stuff our support team handles, Kingston blurted, apparently hoping to deflect further questioning. The important thing is the overall strategic framework for digital transformation. The conference room fell completely silent. Sterling's expression hardened as he processed Kingston's dismissive response. Diana Walsh stopped writing and looked up with obvious surprise. Even Kingston seemed to realize he had said something problematic, but he couldn't figure out how to recover. Sterling closed his leather notebook with a decisive snap and stood up abruptly. "Excuse me for a moment," he said, his voice professionally cordial but unmistakably cold. "I need to make an urgent call." As Sterling left the conference room, I heard him speaking quietly to Diana Walsh in the hallway. "Find out everything you can about the woman in the corner. I think we're being scammed." The climactic twist hit like a physical blow. Sterling suspected that Morrison and Associates was trying to deceive him, and Kingston's incompetence had created exactly that impression. 4 months of meticulous work were being destroyed by 15 minutes of fraudulent presentation. Kingston spent Sterling's absence nervously adjusting his tie and reviewing notes he clearly didn't understand. The other Morrison and Associates team members present began exchanging uncomfortable glances as the implications became clear. Without credible technical expertise, Our entire proposal looked like an elaborate con game designed to extract consulting fees without delivering real value. When Sterling returned 10 minutes later, his demeanor had shifted from frustrated to coldly analytical. Diana Walsh accompanied him with a satisfied expression that suggested her research had been productive. They settled back into their chairs with the air of people who had gained crucial information and were preparing to act on it. The stage was set for complete disaster, and Kingston seemed oblivious to the catastrophe he had created. During Sterling's absence, Kingston turned on me with sudden viciousness, his professional facade cracking like cheap paint. The moment the conference room door closed, his expression transformed from nervous uncertainty to aggressive blame. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he hissed, keeping his voice low enough to avoid being heard in the hallway. "Your body language is undermining my authority. Sterling keeps looking at you like he expects you to contradict me." I stared at him in disbelief. "Bradley, you just told our biggest client that budget projections worth $3 billion are just technical stuff. You quoted implementation timelines that are physically impossible and cost estimates that are wrong by $40 million. Don't lecture me about client relations," Kingston snapped, adjusting his cufflinks with sharp, angry movements. "I've been managing executive relationships since before you graduated college. Sterling doesn't need to hear technical details. He needs to see leadership and strategic vision." "He's asking technical questions because he understands the technology," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Robert Sterling has a computer science degree from MIT and built his company by recognizing innovative solutions. He can tell you don't understand the proposal." Kingston's face flushed red. "Are you suggesting I don't know what I'm talking about?" "I'm suggesting you let me answer questions about work I created," I said, immediately regretting the directness. "Work you created under my supervision," Kingston corrected sharply. "And if you think you can sabotage this presentation to make yourself look indispensable, you're making a serious career mistake." The accusation was so unfair it took my breath away. I had spent 4 months developing every aspect of this proposal, working nights and weekends, sacrificing my personal life. And now, Kingston was suggesting I was trying to sabotage my own work for personal gain. "I would never sabotage this project," I said quietly. "This contract represents everything I've worked toward for 7 years. "Then act like it," Kingston demanded. "Stop making faces when I'm presenting and stop trying to attract Sterling's attention. Your job is to support the strategic leadership of this account, not grandstand for personal recognition." Before I could respond, Kingston revealed something that made my blood run cold. "Catherine Brooks and I had dinner last week to discuss the future direction of client services," he said with casual cruelty. "She agrees that Morrison and Associates needs to present more senior-level leadership to Fortune 500 clients. Your technical skills are valuable, but these relationships require executive presence." The implication was clear. Brooks, the managing partner who had personally assigned me to lead this project, was already planning to subordinate my role to Kingston's political ambitions. 6 months of faith in my abilities and 7 years of building my reputation meant nothing compared to Kingston's connections and networking skills. "I've also been reviewing your other client accounts," Kingston continued, his tone becoming more threatening. "Paramount Manufacturing, Coastal Logistics, Davidson Industries. Impressive technical results, but all of those relationships would benefit from senior-level strategic oversight. Brooks agrees that you've been operating beyond your appropriate scope." I felt the foundation of my career crumbling. Kingston wasn't just stealing credit for the Sterling Industries project. He was systematically positioning himself to take over all my major accounts, using my own success as evidence that I needed his supervision. "Those companies specifically requested to work with me," I said weakly, knowing the protest sounded desperate. "They requested Morrison and Associates services," Kingston corrected, "and they'll get better service with proper leadership structure. You'll still be involved in technical analysis, but client relationships need executive management." The revelation that Kingston had already been maneuvering behind my back for weeks was devastating. While I had been focused on delivering excellent work for Sterling Industries, He had been building political alliances and positioning himself for a promotion based on my achievements. When Sterling returned to the conference room, his presence seemed to fill the space with different energy. Diana Walsh accompanied him, her expression suggesting she had gathered significant intelligence during their brief absence. They settled into their chairs with the coordinated efficiency of a team preparing for battle. Sterling opened his leather portfolio and withdrew several sheets of paper covered with neat handwriting. I hope you don't mind, but I asked Miss Walsh to conduct some research during our break. He said, his tone professionally neutral but somehow ominous. Kingston straightened his tie nervously. Of course, any questions we can answer. Actually, I have quite a few questions, Sterling replied, consulting his notes. Starting with some inconsistencies in the technical analysis you just presented. What followed was a systematic dismantling of Kingston's fraudulent presentation. Sterling asked specific questions about algorithm performance metrics, referenced details from preliminary reports I had sent months earlier, and pointed out mathematical errors in Kingston's cost projections. Each question revealed deeper levels of Kingston's ignorance while demonstrating Sterling's intimate familiarity with genuine technical innovation. Your supply chain optimization model assumes processing capabilities that exceed current industry standards, Sterling observed, referencing one of my most complex calculations. How did you account for computational limitations in enterprise environments? Kingston stammered through an explanation that involved scalable processing solutions and adaptive infrastructure frameworks without addressing the actual question. Sterling listened with the patience of someone allowing an incompetent person to expose themselves completely. The machine learning algorithms you described would require training data sets larger than most companies possess, Sterling continued. What's your methodology for synthetic data generation? Our technical team addresses those implementation details, Kingston replied, falling back on his standard deflection. The strategic framework focuses on business outcomes rather than technical specifications. Sterling's eyes hardened with unmistakable disgust. Mr. Kingston, I built Sterling Industries by understanding both business strategy and technical implementation. When someone presents a $3 billion proposal, I expect them to understand every aspect of what they're selling. The climactic twist came when Sterling asked to speak privately with the technical lead who actually created this strategy. The request hung in the air like a challenge, and Kingston's face turned bright red as he realized Sterling saw through his entire charade. But instead of admitting the truth, Kingston doubled down with desperate arrogance. She's just support staff, he declared, waving dismissively toward me. Ignore her. The words landed like a slap across my face, but they had an even more dramatic effect on Sterling. His expression shifted from professional displeasure to something much more dangerous, and Diana Walsh's pen stopped moving as she looked up in obvious shock. In that moment, I understood that Kingston had just made the biggest mistake of his career and possibly mine. Sterling's reaction to Kingston's dismissive comment was immediate and devastating. His professional composure remained intact, but his steel gray eyes turned absolutely glacial. Diana Walsh set down her pen and leaned forward slightly, her attention focused entirely on what was clearly about to become a defining moment. Support staff, Sterling repeated slowly, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who controlled billions of dollars and thousands of careers. Mr. Kingston, would you mind elaborating on that characterization? Kingston, apparently oblivious to the danger, doubled down with increasing desperation. Well, naturally, technical analysts provide valuable support to strategic leadership, but client relationships require executive-level oversight. Angie does excellent technical work under my direction, but these Fortune 500 partnerships need someone with broader business perspective. I see, Sterling said, opening his leather portfolio and withdrawing a thick folder Diana Walsh must have prepared during their break. Ms. Walsh, would you mind sharing what you discovered during your research? Diana Walsh smiled with obvious satisfaction as she consulted her own notes. Certainly, Mr. Sterling. During our brief absence, I contacted three companies that have worked with Morrison and Associates in the past 18 months: Paramount, Manufacturing Coastal Logistics, and Davidson Industries. My heart stopped. Those were three of my most successful projects, each representing months of innovative problem solving that had saved those companies millions of dollars. I spoke directly with the CEOs of all three companies. Diana Walsh continued, her voice carrying the authority of someone delivering carefully verified facts. Each of them specifically mentioned their positive experiences working with a brilliant analyst named Angie Rodriguez. They credited her personally with developing solutions that transformed their business operations. Kingston's face began losing color, but Diana Walsh wasn't finished. James Patterson at Paramount Manufacturing told me that Ms. Rodriguez single-handedly redesigned their inventory management system, reducing waste by 42% and saving them $38 million annually. Patricia Chen at Coastal Logistics said Ms. Rodriguez created predictive models that prevented a supply chain collapse that could have cost them their largest contracts. The blood was draining from Kingston's face as Diana Walsh continued her methodical destruction of his credibility. Most interesting was my conversation with Michael Davidson at Davidson Industries. Diana Walsh said, consulting her notes with theatrical precision. He mentioned that Morrison and Associates recently sent a new account manager named Bradley Kingston to discuss expanding their relationship. However, Mr. Davidson specifically requested that all future projects be handled exclusively by Ms. Rodriguez, stating that her innovative approach was unlike anything he had seen in 30 years of business. Sterling nodded thoughtfully, as if confirming information he already suspected. And what did these executives say when you mentioned Mr. Kingston's role in their projects? They had never heard of him, Diana Walsh replied with devastating simplicity. The silence that followed was deafening. Kingston's mouth opened and closed wordlessly like a fish gasping for air. The other Morrison and Associates team members present shifted uncomfortably, clearly recognizing that they were witnessing someone's career imploding in real time. But Sterling wasn't done. He leaned forward slightly, his attention focused entirely on Kingston, with the intensity of a predator studying wounded prey. "Mr. Kingston, I'm curious about your background," Sterling said, his tone conversationally dangerous. "According to your LinkedIn profile, you joined Morrison and Associates 2 weeks ago after 3 years at Goldman Sachs. Your previous experience was in municipal bond trading with no background in operational consulting or technology implementation." Kingston tried to respond, but Sterling continued with relentless precision. "Meanwhile, Ms. Rodriguez has been with Morrison and Associates for 7 years, holds advanced degrees in both business administration and computer science from Columbia University, and has published research papers on machine learning applications in supply chain optimization. Her work has been cited by industry publications and academic journals." I had no idea that Sterling had researched my background so thoroughly, but his next revelation was even more shocking. "What's most interesting," Sterling continued, "is that 3 other Fortune 500 companies have approached me in the past 6 months asking about the brilliant analyst at Morrison and Associates who solved complex problems they thought were impossible." Each inquiry led back to Miss Rodriguez. My mind reeled. Major companies had been asking Sterling about me personally, which meant my reputation had spread far beyond my own client relationships. Tech Global Industries wants her to analyze their manufacturing processes, Sterling said, consulting his notes. Meridian Financial needs help with algorithmic trading strategies. International Dynamics is interested in supply chain optimization for their European operations. All of these companies heard about her work through industry networks. Sterling's revelation continued with devastating impact. "I've been in business for 30 years, Mr. Kingston, and I've learned to recognize two things immediately: genuine talent and elaborate fraud. Ms. Rodriguez represents the former, while your presentation this morning exemplified the latter." Kingston finally found his voice, but it came out as a desperate croak. "Mr. Sterling, I think there's been a misunderstanding about the collaborative nature of our work process. The only misunderstanding, Sterling replied with cutting precision, is your apparent belief that I'm too stupid to recognize when someone is trying to take credit for work they didn't do. Sterling stood up slowly, his movements deliberate and final. Mr. Kingston, I want to be absolutely clear about something. I didn't come here today to evaluate Morrison and Associates as a firm. I came here specifically to meet the person who created the innovative analysis that's been circulating through industry networks for the past 6 months. The climactic twist hit like a thunderbolt. Sterling had never intended to work with Morrison and Associates as an institution. He had come specifically to evaluate me personally, and Kingston's fraudulent presentation had confirmed everything Sterling suspected about who really possessed the talent he needed. I'm not just considering canceling this contract, Sterling announced with quiet finality. I'm going to recommend that other companies avoid Morrison and Associates entirely unless they can guarantee that Miss Rodriguez will personally lead their projects. The implications were staggering. Sterling wasn't just rejecting our proposal, he was threatening to destroy Morrison and Associates' reputation in the industry unless I remained the primary contact for all technical consulting. Kingston's career wasn't just damaged, it was obliterated. The moment Sterling finished speaking, something crystallized inside me with perfect clarity. I looked around the marble conference room that had witnessed countless business deals, power plays, and career defining moments, and I realized that this was mine. 7 years of dedication to Morrison and Associates, countless 60-hour weeks, sacrificed weekends, and innovative breakthroughs had led to this single instant where I could either accept being diminished or stand up for everything I had earned. I thought about my father, who had immigrated from Puerto Rico with nothing but determination and built a successful construction business through decades of honest work. He had taught me that respect isn't given, it's demanded through excellence and courage. I remembered my graduate school mentor, Professor Elizabeth Warren at Columbia, who had constantly emphasized that brilliant women must advocate for themselves because no one else will do it for them. But most importantly, I thought about every late night I had spent perfecting algorithms while Kingston was probably attending networking events and playing golf. Every weekend, I had sacrificed to understand complex business problems while he was building political relationships. Every innovative breakthrough I had achieved through pure intellectual effort while he was learning to take credit for other people's accomplishments. The pattern wasn't unique to Kingston. Throughout my career, I had watched mediocre men get promoted based on confidence and connections, while exceptional women remained in supporting roles despite superior performance. I had told myself that the work itself mattered more than recognition, that excellence would eventually be rewarded, that staying quiet and producing results was the path to success. But sitting in that conference room watching Kingston panic as his fraudulent presentation collapsed, I understood that my silence had enabled his theft. Every time I had accepted being introduced as support staff, every time I had let someone else take credit for my innovations, every time I had prioritized harmony over justice, I had contributed to a system designed to exploit my talent while denying my agency. The realization wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. I was 32 years old at the peak of my analytical abilities with a reputation that apparently extended throughout the industry. If I couldn't advocate for myself now, when would I ever have the courage to do it? Sterling was still standing, clearly waiting for someone to respond to his devastating assessment of the situation. Kingston looked like he was about to faint, his face pale and his hands trembling slightly. The other Morrison and Associates team members were studying the table as if hoping to become invisible. I stood up slowly, my movements calm and deliberate. The action drew everyone's attention, but I ignored Kingston's panicked expression and focused entirely on gathering my materials. I closed my laptop with a quiet click, unplugged the power cord, and began organizing my research files into neat stacks. The conference room watched in complete silence as I methodically packed everything I had brought for the presentation. my proprietary algorithms printed on specially watermarked paper to prevent unauthorized copying, my detailed implementation roadmaps containing insights that had taken months to develop, my competitive analysis based on data I had gathered through personal industry relationships. What do you think you're doing? Kingston demanded, his voice cracking with desperation. I continued packing without acknowledging him, sliding my materials into my leather briefcase with the same precision I applied to data analysis. Every document, every file, every innovation I had created was coming with me. Angie stopped this immediately. Kingston tried again, his tone shifting between authority and panic. Those materials belonged to Morrison and Associates. For the first time since Sterling had begun dismantling Kingston's credibility, I spoke. My voice was calm, professional, and absolutely final. Actually, Bradley, since you've made it clear that I'm just support staff, I'm removing myself and all my intellectual property from this project, effective immediately. The impact of my words was immediate and electric. Sterling's eyebrows rose with obvious interest. Diana Walsh leaned forward with sharp attention, and Kingston's mouth fell open as he processed the implications of what I was saying. The algorithms I developed for supply chain optimization were created during my own time using my personal equipment based on research methodologies I pioneered. I continued still packing with methodical precision. The machine learning models are based on my doctoral dissertation, which I wrote before joining Morrison and Associates. The predictive frameworks incorporate innovations I developed and published in academic journals under my own name. Kingston tried to interrupt, but I continued with devastating precision. The comprehensive analysis of Sterling Industries' operations was conducted through my personal industry relationships using contacts I developed over 7 years of independent networking. The cost projections are based on proprietary databases I created and maintain myself. The implementation timelines reflect my understanding of technical limitations that I gained through extensive personal research. I finished packing and stood up, briefcase in hand, facing Sterling directly for the first time during the entire meeting. Since Morrison and Associates considers me just support staff, they're welcome to proceed with this $3 billion project using whatever technical expertise Mr. Kingston can provide, I said, my voice carrying quiet satisfaction. The climactic twist was perfectly clear to everyone in the room. Without my knowledge, experience, and innovations, Morrison and Associates had absolutely nothing to offer Sterling Industries except empty promises and fraudulent presentations. Kingston's attempt to diminish my role had inadvertently revealed that I was the entire foundation upon which their proposal was built. Sterling smiled for the first time since the meeting had begun, and it was the expression of someone who had just witnessed exactly what he hoped to see. "Ms. Rodriguez," he said, his tone shifting to something that sounded almost like admiration. "I don't suppose you'd be interested in discussing alternative arrangements for this project." I looked directly at him, finally free to speak as an equal rather than as someone else's subordinate. "Mr. Sterling, I'd be very interested in that conversation." What happened next unfolded with the devastating efficiency of a perfectly executed business coup. Sterling's smile widened as he gestured toward the chairs at the far end of the conference table, away from Kingston and the other Morrison and Associates representatives. "Ms. Rodriguez, would you mind joining Miss Walsh and me for a private discussion?" Sterling asked, his tone suggesting this was less a request than an inevitability. As I moved toward them, Kingston found his voice with desperate urgency. "Wait just a minute," he protested, his professional composure completely shattered. "You can't just poach our employees during a client meeting. There are legal and ethical considerations here." Sterling turned toward Kingston with the cold patience of someone addressing an irritating insect. "Mr. Kingston, I'm not poaching anyone. I'm offering to discuss a business opportunity with an independent consultant who just terminated her involvement with your project. She's under contract with Morrison and Associates," Kingston insisted, his voice rising with panic. Actually, Diana Walsh interjected smoothly, consulting a different folder from her portfolio. Ms. Rodriguez's employment agreement contains a standard clause allowing immediate resignation without penalty for hostile work environment situations. Being publicly dismissed as support staff while presenting her own work would certainly qualify. The revelation that Diana Walsh had somehow obtained and analyzed my employment contract during their brief research session was both impressive and terrifying. Sterling Industries operated with the kind of ruthless efficiency that built empires. Furthermore, Sterling added with obvious satisfaction, I'm not discussing employment. I'm exploring a consulting arrangement with someone who has demonstrated exactly the kind of innovative thinking Sterling Industries needs for our next phase of growth. Kingston looked like he was about to hyperventilate. What consulting arrangement? Sterling's response was delivered with the casual brutality of someone who destroyed competitors for breakfast. Ms. Rodriguez, Sterling Industries has been developing plans for an internal consulting division focused on digital transformation services. We've been looking for someone with the vision and expertise to lead that initiative. My heart stopped. Sterling wasn't just offering me a new job, he was offering me the opportunity to build something revolutionary from the ground up. The position would be Chief Innovation Officer, Sterling continued, with full authority over technology strategy and the consulting division. The base salary would be $450,000 annually, plus equity compensation that could reach seven figures if performance targets are met. The numbers were staggering. My current salary at Morrison and Associates was $120,000, which meant Sterling was offering nearly four times my current compensation, plus the possibility of genuine wealth through equity participation. Additionally, Diana Walsh added, we've identified several Fortune 500 companies that want to work with you specifically. Tech Global Industries has already authorized a budget of $50 million for supply chain optimization contingent on your personal involvement. Meridian Financial has approved $35 million for algorithmic trading analysis. International Dynamics is prepared to invest $60 million in European operations consulting. The scope was breathtaking. Sterling wasn't just offering me a job, he was offering me the foundation of a consulting empire worth potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. But most importantly, Sterling said, his tone becoming more serious. Sterling Industries believes in building long-term partnerships with exceptional talent. We're not interested in hiring consultants. We want to create equity relationships with people who can help us revolutionize entire industries. Before I could respond, the conference room door opened and Catherine Brooks entered with the urgent energy of someone responding to a crisis. She was impeccably dressed as always, her silver hair perfectly styled, but her expression suggested she had received disturbing news about her most important client meeting. Robert, I apologize for the interruption, Brooks said, approaching our end of the table with diplomatic smoothness. I understand there may have been some miscommunication about project leadership responsibilities. Sterling's expression didn't change, but his tone became even more formal. Catherine, there's been no miscommunication. Your vice president explicitly described Ms. Rodriguez as support staff and suggested I ignore her input on a project she clearly created. Brooks' face went pale as she processed the implications. I'm certain that was simply a misunderstanding about presentation protocol. Angie is one of our most valued senior analysts, and we would never minimize her contributions to this project. Then why did Mr. Kingston spend 20 minutes presenting her work as his own strategic vision? Sterling asked with devastating directness. Brooks turned toward Kingston with an expression that could have frozen fire. Bradley, is this accurate? Kingston tried to explain, but his response came out as incoherent stammering about collaborative development processes and integrated strategic oversight. Brooks listened for about 30 seconds before cutting him off with surgical precision. Mr. Kingston, please return to your office immediately. We'll discuss the situation privately after I've addressed the current client concerns. As Kingston slunk out of the conference room like a defeated animal, Brooks turned back to Sterling with desperate diplomacy. Robert, I want to assure you that Morrison and Associates recognizes Angie's exceptional contributions and would be happy to restructure the account leadership to better reflect her central role. The climactic twist came with Sterling's response delivered with the finality of someone who had already made an irrevocable decision. Catherine, I appreciate the offer, but it's too late for restructuring, he said, standing up to signal the meeting's conclusion. Ms. Rodriguez has accepted our offer to join Sterling Industries as Chief Innovation Officer, effective immediately. Brooks stared at me in shock. Angie, is this true? I realized that everyone in the room was waiting for my response to an offer I hadn't actually accepted yet. But looking at Sterling's confident expression, Diana Walsh's satisfied smile, and Brooks' panicked desperation, I understood that this moment would define the rest of my career. Yes, I said, my voice steady and clear. I'm accepting Sterling Industries' offer. Brooks' careful composure cracked. Angie, you can't be serious. We can discuss partnership, track equity, participation, whatever you need to stay with Morrison and Associates. Catherine, I replied, using her first name for the first time in 7 years. You had dinner with Bradley Kingston last week to discuss subordinating my role to his strategic oversight. You were prepared to let him take credit for my work and reduce me to a supporting position on accounts I developed personally. The accusation hung in the air like an indictment, and Brooks' inability to deny it was confirmation enough. Furthermore, I continued, Sterling Industries isn't just offering me a better position, they're offering me the opportunity to build something entirely new with full authority over strategic direction and equity participation in the results. Sterling nodded with satisfaction. The consulting division Ms. Rodriguez will lead has already secured commitments worth over $200 million from companies that specifically requested her expertise. Brooks realized she was witnessing the complete collapse of her firm's most important client relationship, along with the departure of her most talented analyst. Robert, surely we can find a mutually beneficial arrangement that doesn't require such drastic changes. Sterling's response was final. Catherine, the only arrangement I'm interested in is the one Ms. Rodriguez and I will be developing at Sterling Industries. Morrison and Associates is welcome to compete for our consulting business in the future, but you'll be bidding against the person who created your best ideas. As we prepared to leave, Diana Walsh delivered the final, devastating blow. Oh, and Catherine, she said with obvious satisfaction, you might want to review Mr. Kingston's claims about his previous client's successes. Our research suggests he's been systematically taking credit for projects he never worked on. Brooks' face went completely white as she realized that Kingston's fraud extended far beyond today's presentation. The meeting was over and my old career along with it. 6 months later, I stood in my corner office on the 42nd floor of Sterling Tower, looking out at the Manhattan skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows that perfectly framed the Chrysler Building. The morning sun reflected off countless glass surfaces, creating a glittering urban landscape that seemed to symbolize endless possibilities. My new business cards were stacked neatly on my mahogany desk. Angela Rodriguez, Chief Innovation Officer and Director of Strategic Consulting, Sterling Industries. The transformation had been remarkable in every possible way. Within 72 hours of accepting Sterling's offer, Diana Walsh had negotiated my departure from Morrison and Associates, secured my intellectual property rights, and established Sterling Consulting as a fully operational subsidiary of Sterling Industries. My new office was twice the size of the cubicle I had occupied for 7 years, equipped with state-of-the-art technology, and staffed by a team of brilliant analysts who had been recruited specifically to work with me. The financial reality was equally stunning. My base salary of $450,000 represented security I had never imagined, but the equity participation was generating wealth that bordered on surreal. In 6 months, Sterling Consulting had secured contracts worth over $400 million, with profit margins that exceeded industry standards by substantial percentages. My equity stake was tracking toward valuations that could make me independently wealthy within 5 years. But the most satisfying aspect wasn't the money, it was the vindication of everything I had believed about merit and justice. The companies that had requested my services weren't interested in political connections or networking skills. They wanted innovative solutions to complex problems, and they were willing to pay premium rates for genuine expertise. Tech Global Industries had been our first major success. Their manufacturing optimization project, which I completed in 8 weeks instead of the projected 6 months, generated cost savings of $67 million in the first year alone. The CEO, Jennifer Martinez, had been so impressed that she recommended Sterling Consulting to 3 other companies in her industry network. Meridian Financial's algorithmic trading project had been even more rewarding. My machine learning models improved their trading performance by 28% while reducing risk exposure by 41%. The quantifiable results generated returns that covered my consulting fees within the first quarter of implementation. International Dynamics had presented the most complex challenge, restructuring their European operations to comply with new regulations while maintaining profitability. The solution required integrating also legal compliance, supply chain optimization, and market analysis in ways that had never been attempted. When the project succeeded beyond all projections, saving the company over $100 million in potential penalties, while increasing efficiency, industry publications began describing my work as revolutionary. The success had attracted attention from competitors who tried to poach key team members, but Sterling Industries had anticipated this possibility. Every member of Sterling Consulting received equity participation that vested over time, creating financial incentives for long-term commitment that far exceeded traditional employment benefits. My team now included 12 brilliant analysts recruited from top consulting firms, 2 data scientists with PhDs from MIT, and a business development manager who had previously worked for McKinsey. We operated with complete autonomy within Sterling Industries while having access to resources that smaller firms couldn't match. The combination was devastatingly effective. The contrast with Morrison and Associates couldn't have been more dramatic. Within 2 weeks of my departure, Bradley Kingston had been terminated when Catherine Brooks discovered the extent of his fraudulent claims about previous projects. The review revealed that he had systematically taken credit for work performed by other analysts on at least 6 major accounts, creating legal liability that resulted in client complaints and potential lawsuits. Brooks had tried desperately to salvage the firm's reputation, offering massive discounts to clients and implementing new quality control procedures, but the damage was irreversible. Without access to the innovative methodologies I had developed, Morrison and Associates struggled to deliver the kind of transformational results that had built their reputation. 3 major clients terminated their contracts within 4 months, citing disappointment with analytical quality. The most satisfying vindication came when Brooks called me personally 6 weeks after I had joined Sterling Industries. She had somehow obtained my direct phone number and reached out with what she probably thought was a compelling offer. "Angie, I want you to know that we've completely restructured our approach to senior talent," she said, her voice carrying the desperation of someone watching their business empire crumble. "We're prepared to offer you a partnership position with full equity participation and complete autonomy over your client relationships." "Catherine," I replied, using her first name with the confidence of someone who no longer needed her approval. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested in returning to Morrison and Associates." "We could match Sterling's compensation package," Brooks pressed, "plus partnership benefits that would give you ownership stake in the entire firm." "It's not about the money," I explained patiently. "It's about building something new rather than trying to fix something that's fundamentally broken." Morrison and Associates has a culture that enables people like Bradley Kingston to steal credit and diminish talented women. Changing the compensation structure won't fix the underlying problems. Brooks' silence suggested she understood the deeper implications of my rejection. Talented people don't just leave because of money. They leave because of culture respect and opportunities for growth that align with their values. The call ended with Brooks making one final attempt at manipulation. Angie, you should know that some people in the industry are saying you left Morrison and Associates because you couldn't handle the pressure of senior level responsibility. I laughed, genuinely amused by the transparent attempt to undermine my confidence. Catherine, those same people probably said Bradley Kingston was a strategic visionary. Their opinions don't seem particularly reliable. 6 months later, the industry consensus was clear. Sterling Consulting was setting new standards for analytical innovation while Morrison and Associates was struggling to maintain relevance in an increasingly competitive market. The contrast spoke for itself, but the most meaningful transformation was personal. Every morning, I woke up eager to tackle complex problems that required genuine intellectual effort. Every client meeting was an opportunity to demonstrate expertise that I had earned through years of dedicated study. Every successful project generated satisfaction that came from creating real value rather than navigating political dynamics. I had also begun mentoring young female analysts, both within Sterling Consulting and through professional organizations. Too many brilliant women were accepting subordinate roles because they had been taught to value harmony over justice. I wanted them to understand that advocating for yourself isn't selfish. It's essential for creating positive change in industries that systematically undervalue female talent. The mentoring had led to speaking engagements at business schools, where I shared the lessons I had learned about recognizing your worth and demanding appropriate recognition. The message was simple but powerful: exceptional performance without strategic self advocacy is a recipe for exploitation. Sterling had proven to be an ideal mentor and business partner. He understood that genuine innovation required both intellectual freedom and institutional support. Under his leadership, Sterling Industries was transforming from a technology company into a comprehensive business solutions provider, with consulting services becoming an increasingly important profit center. You know, Sterling said during our quarterly review meeting, when I first heard about your work through industry networks, I expected to find someone with strong technical skills. I didn't expect to find someone who could revolutionize how consulting services are delivered. The compliment was gratifying, but it also reflected a deeper truth about talent recognition. Sterling had succeeded in business because he could identify exceptional capabilities even when they were being suppressed by institutional dynamics. He understood that the most valuable employees are often the ones whose contributions are being minimized by insecure managers. As I reflected on the journey from that humiliating conference room to my current position, the central lesson was clear: talent without advocacy is vulnerable to exploitation, but talent combined with courage and strategic thinking is unstoppable. The moment I stopped accepting other people's definitions of my role and started demanding recognition commensurate with my contributions, everything changed. The story wasn't just about career advancement, it was about justice prevailing over political manipulation. Bradley Kingston's attempt to diminish my role had inadvertently revealed that I was the foundation upon which Morrison and Associates' reputation was built. His downfall wasn't caused by external forces, it was the inevitable result of fraudulent behavior meeting someone who refused to enable it. Now, as I prepared for another day of solving complex problems for companies that valued innovation over politics, I understood that the most important business skill isn't technical expertise or networking ability. It's the courage to recognize your worth and the wisdom to demand that others recognize it too. The conference room where Bradley Kingston had tried to erase my contributions was now a distant memory, but the lesson learned there would guide every future decision. Never allow anyone to minimize your achievements. Never accept being treated as less than your contributions deserve. And never hesitate to walk away from situations that don't align with your values. Justice hadn't been served by external forces, it had been achieved by refusing to accept injustice and having the courage to act on that refusal. The 3B client had walked out with me not because of loyalty or sentiment, but because he recognized that talent and integrity are irreplaceable assets in a world full of fraudulent pretenders. Have you ever been in a situation where someone tried to take credit for your hard work? How did you handle it, and what would you do differently if you could go back? I'd love to hear your stories about standing up for yourself in challenging workplace situations. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like to help others who might be facing similar challenges find it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding the courage to advocate for yourself and creating positive change in toxic work environments. Share this with anyone who needs encouragement to recognize their worth and fight for the recognition they deserve. Thank you for listening, and remember that your talent and contributions matter more than anyone else's politics or insecurities.